And I am starting the webinar. Miha, Netwanyane Wallace Cleaves. Hello, my name is Wallace Cleaves, and it is wonderful to be here with you today. I'm going to introduce myself first and do a little housekeeping before I introduce the rest of our panelists and get this started. I just want to do the basic housekeeping that today's webinar is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent to each participant to share on social media. And so my name again is Wallace Cleaves. I am the board president of the Tongva Tarahat Conservancy, our land and culture conservancy for the Tongva community. I am a professor at the University of California at the Riverside. I'm a member of the California Center for Native Nations and was a previous director. And I am really excited to hear this conversation today. I also want to just welcome the wisdom, the thoughts, the teachings of our ancestors as we gather here today, and hope that they will guide our conversation and help us find a way to improve our relationship with the land, with our environment, and with our communities. So just a little bit of context here. We're going to be hearing a lot more about this, but I want to just kind of note that our focus is really going to be on thinking about the ways that the land back movement, but more importantly and more critically here for what we're talking about, particularly in the wake of the fires, is the traditional ecological knowledge, the way that our relationship with the environment, that native peoples from all over the Turtle Island and many other places as well is increasingly being found to be central and really important in the way that we restore an equitable and responsible relationship with the land. The way that organizations like the TTPC, which work for land return to native communities, can help and support that. I want to also acknowledge the sponsors and the donors who are here with us today, those who have made possible the TTPC's work and other people's works. And I want to particularly thank the California Center for Native Nations. I want to thank the directors, Mark Minch de Leon and Kehalani Vaughn. I want to also thank the staff of the CCNN for helping and supporting and making this possible, and the staff of the TTPC who have helped to make this work and to give us this opportunity to have this discussion. So our discussion really follows today in the wake of what is, and I want to acknowledge this, a catastrophe, the Eaton fire, and the the challenges and the difficulties that it brought to so many of us. But I also want to be thinking about it in a way that I think is an indigenous way of thinking about fire, about our relationship with the land. That fire is, and we recognize can be very destructive, but can also be restorative, and that there are ways to see this as an opportunity to grow, to learn, and to develop. We hope that the TTPC, the Tongva Tarahat Bahava Conservancy, which has the location in what we have renamed as Hongna, the place of the bears, in Altadena, right above Eaton Canyon, can help facilitate this, can help bring more knowledge about how traditional ecological knowledge can help and restore the land, can prevent some of the more destructive elements of the fire, and bring us together in a knowledgeable way of really understanding what we can do here. So to start with, I want to gauge your awareness of traditional ecological knowledge. And so we're going to launch a little poll here. Okay, I'm hoping the poll is going to come up here. This is a TEK awareness poll. Yeah, there it is. Great. So everybody can kind of respond to this, and this will give us a little bit of a chance to kind of see where our audience is, which can be very helpful for us, and I think also very illuminating. Okay, I'm just going to give it another little bit for folks to kind of look through that one. All right. We seem to, okay, great. I'm gonna hope, and hopefully, yeah, you've got the results now. So I think that's really interesting. So we see that, 2/3 of our audience is aware of what traditional ethnological knowledge is, or has at least heard of it. But a third, but a little bit more than a third has, yeah. And I saw like a note there that, not everybody knows of it from the acronym, but knows of the idea. And so that's something that we're going to really be kind of delving into today and thinking about. So there's room to kind of share, basic knowledge of this, but also to get into the nitty gritty on it too. We also wanted to have another poll, just the TTPC Who We Are poll here, which should have popped up, which is, oh, have you heard of the TTPC before? We just wanted to kind of see, if those who are joining us today had heard of us before, and we'll get a little bit of a response there. Okay. And it's looking very similar. All right. All right. And so again, very similar to that. About 2/3 of you have heard of us before, but of the TTPC, but another third really haven't. So you'll learn a little bit more from some of our panelists today about who we are and what we do, and we'll be able to get into that when we answer some of the questions that you've brought up before as well. Okay. Um, so having gotten through those, I want to start this conversation. But first, I do need to introduce our panelists here. So our first panelist today is Charles Sepulveda, who is a Tongva and Acjachemen community member. He is also a TTPC board member, a professor at UC Riverside, and an author. I should just say, a good friend of mine. And he will be talking about sort of the history of the way that traditional ecological knowledge has not been responded to and included in by governmental agencies, and the impacts of that to some extent. We also have Sean Woods, the Chief of Planning for LA County Department of Parks and Recreation, and he will be giving us some insights into the impacts of the Eaton fire and thinking about the ways that state agencies can interact with TEK and tribal communities. And then we also have Cristhian Mace, a natural areas biologist with the Los Angeles County Parks and Recreation, who will be able to give us a scientific perspective on this. And really, I think, and this is what's so intriguing to me in many ways, thinking about the ways that science and traditional ecological knowledge kind of meet together and find ways to hopefully really tackle some of the challenges and problems that we have, and work together, and that we can see that these have a wonderful synergy together. But to start out, just so we can all get a chance to share something together, I just wanted to ask a warm-up question of each of us, and we'll go in that order with Charles, Sean, and then Cristhian. Either or, if you could say just something quickly, just a couple, like a sentence or two, about either your relationship with fire, if you have like a personal relationship with fire as a thing, as a kind of ontological entity that I think for many of us it is, or a really poignant memory or image, particularly from the Eaton fire, since we're kind of concentrating on that. So, Charles, if you're willing to start out.
Yeah, thank you, Wallace. I'll begin with from the Eaton fire. When the fire first broke out, and looking at the app to see where it was located and how close it was to our land in Altadena, Huhunga, and just not knowing whether the work that we've done to establish our nonprofit, to establish our homeland, to regain uh, a relationship with the land there in Altadena, whether it was going to be safe or not. And that not knowing was really hard in thinking about the destruction that the fire had.
Thank you. Thank you. Sean?
So in terms of my relationship with fire, prior to the Eaton fire, it was, I would say I had a rather simplistic relationship with fire, but I was able to to tour the Altadena community a couple days after the conflagration, and we were scheduled to meet with FEMA to locate a waste removal site in one of our parks. And I just remember driving up there and then driving into the devastation zone and just being overwhelmed by just the power of this fire and how it had just devastated this historic community, and walking around and just seeing just like a forest of chimneys, nothing else left in the ground, and EPA men walking around in Tyvek suits, extracting propane tanks and EV batteries out of cars. It had this sort of almost science fiction quality to it. And so I would say I have a deeper respect for fire at this point, and a healthy dose of fear.
Thank you. Christian?
Well, Eaton Canyon was my home base. That's where I reported to day in and day out. And I was there with the staff the evening before the fire broke out. 45 minutes before the fire broke out, we were locking up and we're just remarking on the incredible winds that were pummeling the valley that day. We had 60-mile-an-hour winds crashing into the canyon. And so I had the opportunity to go back to Eaton Canyon the morning afterwards. And much to what Sean was saying, it was like a curtain of non-catastrophe and then catastrophe driving through Altadena. It was devastating. It was profound and traumatizing. And as I was driving into Eaton Canyon, that's when I actually started crying, because of the relief, the wave of relief that I felt seeing how resilient the canyon was up against the devastation. And it was the first steps towards feeling some hope that morning, to seeing how well the natural aspect of the canyon survived the fire. And I hope to talk more about that tonight.
Thank you. Thank you all. All right, well, you're going to hear more from each of these panelists. And to start with, Charles is going to give us some context and to think about the suppression of traditional ecological knowledge in California and how that may have led to some of these events. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you. Miha. Hello, everyone. And thank you for everyone for attending tonight. This is the first of a series of webinars that the Tongva Taraha Pahava Conservancy has planned. A little bit of background: TTPC was established in 2021, and we received land back in Altadena that we named Huhunga, the place of the bear, in 2022. I also want to thank the California Center for Native Nations at the University of California, Riverside for hosting this event. Owesh Koneha, Tehovet Tamit, thank you. It's a good day. While my talk focuses on Native peoples, specifically in Los Angeles and California Indians in general, talking about us in the past, the present, and the future, I would also like to begin acknowledging the devastation that is caused by wildfires, specifically the Eaton Canyon fire. And at last count that I saw, 31 people died due to the Eaton fire. It also destroyed more than 9,000 buildings. That's a large-scale devastation. And the destruction from fires in places such as California, Hawaii, Australia, they're unprecedented. Global climate change, development, and colonialism are responsible. In California, wildfires are not caused by colonialism. Wildfires are colonialism. Before the arrival of Europeans and the onset of colonialism, fire was an integral part of California Indian cultures. It was the center of our ceremonies, included in our creation stories. Our ceremonial cycles ensured our ongoing relationship and responsibilities to the land. For the Taraham, the people, also known today as Tongva, Kish, Gabrielino, our homeland Toangar, which also means the world, was culturally burned with ceremony. Every aspect of Taraham life was lived within an ancestral and storied land, where all our relatives, human and more than human, were known through sacred histories. As an example, using fire to hunt rabbits was not only for utilitarian purposes, but was also done with prayer. The elderberry rabbit sticks that are shaped kind of like Australian Aboriginal boomerangs were formed by hunters with fire. The low-intensity fires set for hunting rabbits serve the purpose of rounding up the rabbits, but also for burning the landscape to decrease the fuel for wildfires. These cultural burns, whether for hunting or not, also helped germinate more plants, some of which have evolved to favor fire as part of their life cycle in regeneration and germination. For example, our sacred oak trees have evolved several fire-resistant traits, including thick bark, the ability to resprout from their root collar, and the ability to store energy in their roots. Fire creates favorable conditions for oak regeneration by reducing the understory plants and preparing a suitable seedbed. Acorns were the staple food source for the Tarahum. Fire was essential for the healthy growth and abundance of oaks and acorns. California Indians have long recognized the benefits to their homelands from fire and its regenerative potential. We often refer to the intellectual systems rooted in the cultural stewardship of our homelands as traditional ecological knowledge, or TEK. The knowledge aspect indicates that cultural burning is not merely an action, but rather part of an intellectual system. It is science. Before colonialism, with Tongva and our intellectual system intact, fire was beneficial. We used fire for thousands of years to steward our homeland, renewing food and medicinal plants, creating habitats for animals, and reducing the risk of more devastating wildfires. Fire is, and always has been, an opportunity for rebirth. It carries lessons for the future. Tarahum Eyo Chavoam, our California Indian fires, carry our philosophies and knowledges. The fires are Nachake, actively being relit. Huhunga, our land in Altadena, stewarded by the Tongva Taraha Bahava Land Conservancy, is one aspect of the long struggle to rematriate our homeland and relight our culture. Much has changed since we were the sole managers and stewards of our homelands, free from colonial interference. The Spanish first arrived in what would be named California in 1542. Juan Rodriguez Cabrillo and his crew landed at Catalina on October 7th, 1542. Our ancestors, the Honukvetam, greeted the Spanish on the ocean in Titiatam, canoes, and exchanged news and trade goods. On the following day, Cabrillo took particular notice of the Tarahum Eyochavoam, the Indian fires, and named what is now called San Pedro Bay, Bahia de los Fumos, or Bay of Smoke. From the brief description of what the crew saw, it is unclear what those fires were. Could they have been cooking fires from Tarahum villages? Southern California and the Los Angeles Basin were among the most densely populated regions in North America. Or were the fires cultural burns? Either way, fire was included in the first European observations of Tongva, our homeland. Spain began colonizing California in 1769, establishing missions, military presidios, and pueblos. Mission San Gabriel was established in the Tarahum homelands in 1771. In 1781, the Pueblo of Los Angeles was established at the village of Yanga, what is now also called downtown Los Angeles. According to the Franciscan mission records, my fifth great-grandmother, Maria Dolores, was born at Yanga in 1767. Missionization, militarization, and settler colonialism functioned together to enslave the Tarahum. The colonizers attempted to Christianize the Indians and alienate us from our heritage, the cultures of our ancestors, and our human-land relationships. The first colonial anti-Indian fire legislation in California was enacted in 1793, a relatively early period in the state's colonial history. Governor Jose Joaquin Arriaga wrote that every year the Indians, Christian and Gentile, start fires in the fields. According to the governor, he received various complaints about the serious damages that result from the fires. He proclaimed that the missionary fathers should threaten the Christian Indians with rigors of justice in case fires are started. The standard form of justice, as Arriaga called it, at the missions and presidios included whippings, commonly 25 strikes to the back, putting Indians in stocks or shackles, and imprisonment. For continuing their ancestral ceremonial cycles of stewarding their homelands and renewing foods and medicines with fire, Indians were severely punished. Traditional ecological knowledge was rigorously policed to control native uses of fire and alienate them from their ancestral intelligence systems. The Spanish viewed the Tarahum as gente sin razón, people without reason. This view was extended to the Indian use of fire, to which the Spanish saw themselves and their view of fire as superior. The white supremacist fire legislation stopped Indians from stewarding their homeland through cultural burns, continued through the Spanish and Mexican colonial periods as more native land came under the control of the colonizers through the missions, military, and settlers. California Indians resisted colonialism through various means. They would often run away, they were fugitives, and in essence, they were stealing themselves from the mission slave regime. If they were caught, they were severely punished, as were those who attempted to conceal them. They also violently refused the mission system with arms, and they used fire to burn the missions, including San Diego and San Ynez, in an effort to rebirth their freedom from enslavement. Once the United States took control of California in 1848, a new era of genocide and enslavement followed. Although admitted to the Union as a free state, California passed the notoriously euphemistic Act for the Government and Protection of Indians, also known as the Indian Indenture Act, in 1850. In its first session, the California State Legislature facilitated California Indian genocide and enslavement. California's first governor, Peter Burnett's governance over California Indians can best be described through his own words: that a war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct must be expected. At the same time, they were enforcing a genocide through law and policy. The settler population was ensuring that California Indians were ineligible to become citizens, vote, or testify in court. California laws and settler economies had violent and deadly effects on California Indians, including legalizing their murder and paying settlers for Indian scalps. The 1850 Act authorized settlers to kidnap Indian children and the theft of Indian labor power. In Los Angeles, a slave market was established where the federal courthouse now stands. Indians were subjected to the 1850 Act and deemed vagrants, arrested, imprisoned, and auctioned off to the settler landowners for forced labor to pay off their debt for being imprisoned. The Indians who were paid for their labor were paid mainly with alcohol, leading to their vagrancy and the cycles of arrest, auction, and forced labor. As some scholars have noted, between the 1850s and 1870s, the California Indian population in Los Angeles plummeted from approximately 4,000 to less than 300. The 1850 Act for the Government and Protection of Indians also included a provision that restricted California Indians practicing traditional ecological knowledge, not only through murder and enslavement, but also making fire for land management illegal. The same law that was enslaving California Indians, that was authorizing their murder, also took away our ability to continue our traditional ecological knowledge. It attacked our bodies, our sovereignty, and our intellectual systems based in the environments of our homelands. Ending tribal control of our homelands, enforcing white supremacist land management and economic systems has radically changed the environment. Tongva has been transformed by colonialism from a diverse landscape of rivers, wetlands, forests, and coastal sage scrub to a place most settlers view as a desert. Often I hear, Los Angeles is a desert. It's only viewed that way because of colonialism. Before, it was full of wetlands. Development, the rerouting and damming of rivers, entombing them in concrete, are all central to environmental change, but so is the disruption of traditional ecological knowledge systems, including cultural burns that regenerate the environment. The Eaton Canyon fire that burned Huhunga in January and the many other fires are caused directly by settler views of the environment. Dating back to the first arrival of the Spanish, to the 1850 Act, to centuries of land management practices that have suppressed California Indian cultures. Wildfires are colonialism. At Huhunga, the Tongva Pahava Land Conservancy relied on traditional ecological knowledge rooted in a California Indian philosophy that centers on the ancestors and the generations yet to come. When we were gifted our land at Huhunga, we immediately set to work on protecting our oak grove and mitigating the potential for wildfire. We removed over 90 eucalyptus trees. There were 90 eucalyptus trees on a 1-acre plot of land. Through our actions to recuperate our culture, by removing the eucalyptus trees, we also helped stop the forward progress of the Eaton fire. It burned onto our land, destroying 2 structures, but without the removal of those eucalyptus, the fire would not only have spread to our main structure, but it would have advanced to the surrounding properties and homes, and more lives may have perished in the fire. After the fire, we have the opportunity for rebirth. We can regenerate our cultures and continue the long project of rematriating our homeland into a ceremonial relationship. The history of colonialism does not end with a conversation, this one or any other conversation, but discussion can help form generative relational understandings. Again, I want to thank those in the audience who have joined us. Hopefully, colonial institutions such as the County of Los Angeles can better become guests in our homeland, become kuyam, guests, respecting tribal sovereignty and our traditional ecological knowledge. Our speakers that are going to come after me are Sean Woods and Cristhian Mace, and in my brief discussions with them, they seem like great people. But on the one hand, we need to hold people's feet to the fire, that saying, because the County of Los Angeles is a colonial institution, and we need to have better communication between the county and the tribal nations, the various tribal nations within the County of Los Angeles, including those that are Tongva, and doing so would only further the ability for our tribal nations to engage in our traditional ecological knowledge. One way that this can be accomplished is through land back, through gifting the land back to the tribal nations if they want it. Another is the co-management of land, where Native peoples and tribal nations are not merely stakeholders, but equal decision makers. So I look forward to learning more from our guest presenters, and look forward to the conversation that follows their presentations. So thank you. Oweshkoneha.
Oweshkoneha, and thank you, Charles. Thank you so much. I saw a number of people saying that was very powerful and moving. And I think this is a perfect follow-on, as you noted there, for Sean Woods to give us a sense of the impacts of the fire, but also to consider and think about how agencies can responsibly address traditional ecological knowledge and to respond to the challenging questions that Charles has brought up. So Sean, thank you for being here, and please go ahead and.
Thank you, Wallace, and thank you, Charles, for that incredible presentation. And, I agree with you wholeheartedly. I think that the county has a very long way to go. I think this is the beginning, hopefully, of many conversations and actions. Most importantly, and we take very seriously the recommendations that were codified in the harms report that was authored by local tribal individuals. And, we need to move beyond land recognition as just the sort of check the box sort of obligatory responsibility. But I think that in terms of the Eaton fire, you know, just the pure devastation in terms of the scale and the scope of this natural disaster, and the realization on my part and my colleagues that due to climate change that we'll need to figure out a way to coexist with fire, because uh, we are now living in a fire-prone landscape. Uh, Altadena is in this area called the WUI, which is the Wildland Urban Interface. You'll hear a lot about that in the press and in a lot of the reports coming out. It's nothing new. It's been mapped throughout the state. It is that interface where residential and urban communities abut wild lands, and because of past practices, they've become extremely fire prone. And so I think that you know, to talk about our devastation, which we had 6 parks that were either completely destroyed or sustained significant damage, and all of them are abut the wildland interface. At Eaton Canyon alone, we lost well, over 200 acres of habitat were destroyed, as well as about 4.5 miles of our trail system was decimated, not just by the fire, but the storms that happened immediately after. We had the collapsing of hillsides, the significant erosion, and uh, unlike anything I've ever seen, you know, but the silver lining in all this, I'd like to say, is that out of this unprecedented tragedy, we are presented, I believe, with a once in a lifetime opportunity to consider a new way and approach of how to restore, protect, and manage public lands, ancestral lands. I can tell you that there is a new openness at the county level, particularly in our department, to exploring the meaningful collaboration with Native communities and applying traditional ecological knowledge as a significant component of ecological restoration of our natural areas. For instance, immediately after the fires, the county leapt into action and they established 9 task force to jumpstart fire recovery. And I was charged with leading the Natural and Cultural Resources Fire Recovery Task Force. And that group seeks to rehabilitate and restore the county's natural resources and cultural heritage. But embedded within that task force, we established a tribal and indigenous relations working group that has county employees, but as well as tribal representation. And they are specifically focused on developing and strengthening and building relations with First Nations, tribal affiliated 501c3s, as we are now in conversation with the Conservancy about partnering with your restoration of your land and as well as ours. There's synergies there, we believe, as well as indigenous-led organizations throughout the county. And I think that the focus will be on increasing ecosystem restoration and countywide resiliency to future disasters through the scaling up of local indigenous land stewardship, native plant restoration, sustainable resource management, with Cristhian we'll get into talking about later, as well as culturally sensitive rebuilding strategies, moving just beyond the natural areas, moving into the residential zones. There is great opportunity there. And I do also want to say that we are just at the beginning of this relationship and trust building. We're working at the speed of trust. But because of the work we've been doing to date, we are working, for instance, on the first reinterment agreement with the San Manuel Band of Mission Indians in the Antelope Valley to reinter human remains back to their respective locations. That will be the first in the county. And this year alone, we were granted permission to hire the very first tribal liaison in the county's history. I mean, the county parks was formed in 1944, and now in this day and age, the first tribal liaison, her name's Janae Ornelas. I believe I said her, she's on the call, but I won't call her out. She's a member of the Tatavian Band of Mission Indians, and she's going to be working really, you know, advocating for more resources, fostering meaningful partnerships, and strengthening our relationship between the county and diverse Native communities that have long called this land home. And she will also be responsible for policy development. She'll be working side by side with tribal communities as sort of that liaison between government and tribal communities to make sure, there she is, I see her clapping her hands there. Hey, Janae. You know, we selected Janae because she does have such a deep knowledge of tribal protocols, cultural histories, tribal sovereignty, particularly tribes in California and Los Angeles. And we're really hoping this is the beginning of true and meaningful engagement and collaboration moving forward. So I'll stop there. I could go on, but I'll save it for later.
All right. And you want to hand it off to Christian?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. So I've been with the county since December of 23. And one of the most important reasons why the county hired a biologist was to create resource management plans for all the natural areas within the county system. And that includes places from Eaton Canyon to the Devil's Punch Bowl to the 16 and counting wildlife sanctuaries throughout the Antelope Valley and the Los Angeles Basin. And this is a document that contains guiding principles of how we will manage these spaces for decades to come. And by we, I mean county, stakeholders like docents and community members, but more importantly, the tribal voices. And part of that is including a management objectives and goals that are going to be in line with the policies that are created between Janae and the tribal folks that we have on this call and throughout the broader Los Angeles Basin. And so we're going to be incorporating this traditional ecological knowledge into the way that we manage Eaton Canyon. And one of the things that I wanted to start off by saying is that fire is not new to Eaton Canyon. You can look at records from CAL FIRE going back over the past 120 years to demonstrate that the Eaton Canyon vicinity has had at least 20 documented fires, each within varying scope and intensity. And so this history reminds us that fire is a part of this ecosystem. It's part of the natural rhythm of this landscape. But it's important to note, as Charles stated, that fire has been historically managed by the people who steward this land before we came along. It hasn't been suppressed. And so with TEK, we can start infusing this landscape management with practices like cultural burnings that help maintain these resilient habitats that can prevent the catastrophic buildup of fuels that are creating these massive catastrophic wildflowers. And we can actually promote biodiversity because Charles touched on it. This is a landscape that evolved with fire. So a lot of the plants out here can only germinate with the smoke, the heat, or the chemicals that are put into the ground from fire. It's been 32 years since the Kinaloa fire from 1992. And when you go out into the landscape and look at Eaton Canyon right now, you see species of wildflowers popping up that we haven't seen in decades. We have 7 different species of Phacelia recorded. We keep finding new species. I shouldn't say new. We keep finding species of lotus popping up in the wash. We had mariposa lilies popping up in the wash. So this is a vibrant, thriving landscape that feeds on fire. And so we need to find the way to not just recover from the fire, but recover from the absence of fire stewardship. And I think that's why this conversation is so important now to help shape how we move forward in this new landscape.
All right. Thank you. And did you want to say anything about the poll question?
Well, certainly.
The fire readiness?
Okay. So I guess before we continue, this is an opportunity to hear from you, the audience. We have an audience poll that we'd like to offer. Very simply, what's one thing that you or your family already do or could start doing to make your home more fire safe or ensure your personal safety? And you have a couple of options to choose from. It could be from keeping the gutters and roofs clear of leaves, storing firewood away from your home, creating a 5-foot zone ember resistance, having an emergency go bag ready, or even answering that you're not sure yet and you're here to learn. So please take a moment to respond, and then we'll see what we get as the response.
Thank you. Finishing up. We should be finished. Okay, great. We've had everybody answer, so we've got it. Oh, wait, nope, they're answering now. Sorry. All right. and we have some responses in the chat as well. And we're gonna have another poll following that one as well. Considering resources and visibility before we get to our kind of more discussion element of this, where we all really kind of interact and talk back and forth, and also get to answering some of your questions too. We're going to be asking the next question we're going to be asking is about resources and visibility, and really a TEK education poll, asking what you think is the most important step that we can take to strengthen traditional ecological knowledge, and to prevent to help prevent, or I don't even know, not prevent really, but to mitigate wildfire catastrophes like the Eaton fire, and to choose the one that you think is most impactful. So let's look at this one. Oh, we're almost, oh yeah, and that one's up now too. Okay. All right, and I'm just looking to see, I don't know if we've shared the results with everybody yet. No, oh, no, we can't see the, okay, right, long answer. So we can't see the results for those ones too, but we'll be looking at those. And no, we appreciate that. That's really helpful for us. This is a chance for us to kind of learn from you what you think is really kind of most important, what things you are all doing, and what things you think that we all should be engaged with and working on as we kind of continue to consider how we're going to be doing this work going forward. All right. So I want to kind of open this up to kind of more of our conversation here between us. We'll have time to take some, we'll be taking some of the questions that were asked as well. But Charles, there was a question you were going to ask Sean, kind of relating kind of more directly, hoping to foster a conversation. This, of course, any of us can kind of like chime in here, but this is just a chance to kind of get this going.
Yeah, thank you. So the question that I have here for you, Sean, and for anybody who wants to speak to it is, especially with uh, anti-DEI legislation, I'm seeing stuff in at a Northern California park where they removed the indigenous peoples from the signage that had been, replacing some newer signage that was more about a history that included Native peoples. How can the County of LA and other park systems, given that recent history of things that are happening, um, can adapt and include Indigenous voices in a much greater way than perhaps even signage can do, right? But really include Native peoples as co-managers and not just as people who have a stake in the game. Because obviously we have a stake in the game. Everybody does. So how can you include us in better ways, more meaningful ways?
That's a great question, Charles. And, I think that given the current context, it's a frightening time. But I can tell you that whether it's the city of Los Angeles or the county of Los Angeles, that the resistance is strong. And I think I'm actually seeing a doubling down of our efforts in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I used to work for the California State Parks for over 20 years. And I've been with the county for about 5 years now. And the reason I wanted to work for the county because of the groundbreaking work it had done in 2016 with the park needs assessment. It was a national model for park equity and planning. And it just really is, it's been modeled throughout the country in terms of looking at the distribution of resources. We have 5 county supervisors prior to the 2016 plan. The money came into the county and it was a divide by 5. Everyone got their fair share. We mapped out what are the highest need communities in Los Angeles, and we direct all our resources to those highest need communities. First and foremost, they're prioritized. We just completed the update to the Park Needs Assessment, the Park Needs Assessment Plus. And what I bring this all up because a critical component of that was we worked with Sacred Places Institute, and I believe you're on the board of Sacred Places. We worked with them and we conducted focus outreach to engage Native Americans and created a survey that was specific to Native American community priorities. And what we heard through those surveys was that there was a desire and need to have access to and privacy for Native peoples to use, enjoy, and practice traditional ceremonies on their ancestral lands, as well as having access to those lands for plant gathering and other spiritual practices. And so moving forward, we actually have taken those recommendations. We, right out of the gate, I'm going back to the fire recovery, we have just received county funding, we've received state funding, and we have significant philanthropic support to start an ecological restoration center, landscape center at Eaton Canyon. It's going to be on the 4.5-acre equestrian parking lot. And it's a place where we will have an advisory committee coming to come together with us, with our biologists and our policymakers to make recommendations of how traditional ecological knowledge can be uplifted to create a more resilient landscape. This could also lead to co-management opportunities as well as co-stewardship opportunities. In addition, a workforce development component is also being considered. We're working very closely with the Tatavian. You may know that they formed the very first tribal conservation corps, which is a youth-focused tribal conservation corps, promoting and restoring cultural values of indigenous peoples through the practice and application of traditional ecological knowledge. They have a native plant nursery in the valley. And so Eaton Canyon is on Tongva ancestral land, and so we're looking at collaborative opportunities to have Tongva youth work with the tribal conservancy to be a part of the recovery efforts. So, you know, there's that stewardship component. You're out there working in the field with the plants, with the materials, and there's a sense of ownership there. So that's just one example, and I think Cristhian can talk a lot more about the Ecological Landscape Recovery Center and some of the work that she'll be doing as well.
Yeah, no, and just to introduce that, Cristhian, I kind of following that, my question to you was really going to be like, how do you see that Eaton Canyon, and you know, following Sean's question, but also how do you see that Eaton Canyon can become, and the restoration of it can become a traditional ecological knowledge kind of model, especially, you know, kind of what you shared with the kind of wonderful diversity that we're seeing in the wake of this.
So the recovery for Eaton Canyon, we're taking this scaled approach. You know, what does recovery look like in the immediate future, in the next couple of years, over 5 years, over 10 years? And so this Landscape Recovery Center is an opportunity to bring the community back in the near future. Yeah, perfect. Yeah, if you do look at this slide, you can see what that scale looks like. And at the very southern part of the park, you see that equestrian center. And right now we're in the works of getting a prefabricated office on site. We're trying to get water and power back on site. And we're going to bring staff back on site. And with bringing back people to the Landscape Recovery Center, we're going to collect seeds out in Eaton Canyon in the wash. We're going to grow these seeds on site. We're going to practice these principles for bringing back this land in a sustainable and culturally important way. I have to say, there is so much mustard and castor bean and tree tobacco growing on Eaton Canyon's landscape as we speak. And so one of the most important things that I see that we can do in the very near future is start addressing this non-native invasive plant on this landscape. And I think there are so many ways that we can go about that. There are what I'll call conventional Western ways, where it's just this endless cycle of pulling and cutting the plants out of the ground. What I think we have here is a really exciting opportunity to try to reintroduce cultural burns onto this landscape. Right now, it's a framework. Right now, it's in discussions, but I am very cautiously optimistic about a future stewardship on Eaton Canyon where we are partners with tribal leaders, with tribal wisdom guiding us on how we can better steward this landscape. And the Landscape Recovery Center can be that physical place at Eaton Canyon where we can start this healing journey together.
Thank you for that, Christian. That is so very important, right? Those invasive species, especially the mustard, is
Oh,
just,
yeah.
it ignites so easily and um, can cause much greater fires. And I know that the tribal communities from Los Angeles County, many of us, we are in the stages of relearning some of these practices. And so to have a place that's already burned, where we can organize with other tribal nations that might have more experience with doing cultural burns, as a way to relearn that and utilizing a natural environment that is within our homelands to be able to do that would be so beneficial for our tribal communities as well as the land. And so, we can revitalize and heal ourselves by revitalizing and healing the land.
I love how you phrased that, because when I've been looking at Eaton Canyon and I look at places like our oak woodland, 90% of that canopy survived the fire. And so watching the resiliency of this canyon, I feel like is an opportunity for us to like monitor, to watch our own like resiliency in this landscape. And I'm, how do I want to say this? The mustard is such an issue, I mean, like when those seeds are dropped into the ground, they can remain in the seed bank for up to 75 years. And so the way we approach this is not just what are we going to do in the next year or two, but it's like, how are we going to approach stewardship for the next 7 decades, for the next 100 years, when all of us are gone and our children's children's children are left to continue the stewardship of this space? That's the framework that I want to think about this.
Yes, agreed. It has to be generational thinking. We can't, kind of continue this Western model of only thinking about what's profitable in the moment, but thinking about future generations. And one of the things that traditional ecological knowledge can really help us think of is that how to learn from the ancestors and apply it to the future generations. Um, the kind of problematic or scary part of traditional ecological knowledge becoming something that is talked about more frequently, especially by non-natives. And I'm glad this coming into the vocabulary of non-native peoples and thinking about native land management, about how we used culture and ceremony to think about our relationship with the land. That becoming part of the vocabulary of non-natives, including from the state or from the county, is the way that can be um, it can be taken from us, and so then it's applied by non-natives. And so I was thinking about how both you and Sean might speak back to that about how it can be utilized in a way that centers Indigenous peoples rather than centering Western ways of knowing.
So, I've been working in the park and recreation field for about 30 years now. And one of the things I've learned is that this work is generational. And there's an inherent tension between taking the time required to build trust, to build relationships, to gain community input and support and make sure that your priorities are aligned with your community's priorities. And then there's the political timelines, the need to cut ribbons, to open things, to show that progress has been made. And I think that you're going to see that tension here at Eaton Canyon right now. There's a great rush. There's the bureaucratic process of rebuilding, which is like, how many permits have we processed today? How many septic tanks have come online? And then I think when you're talking about, we have to have a complete new mindset with this. And I think that Christian talked about this, and I think that I totally agree. There's a window of opportunity here because of the tragedy. There's this outpouring of support. There's this outpouring of just passion and support of like, how can I help? How can I lend a hand? And from the county, I sense that they're going to let us try out new approaches because we can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different outcome. And as I said in the beginning, that the 200 acres, I think if we hadn't had the fire that, and we were talking about traditional ecological knowledge, we might be like, okay, let's do a little piece of land over here. Let's do a test plot here. But to actually apply traditional ecological knowledge on a macro scale for a whole ecosystem could be really, really profound. And so I can tell you the people working with like Christian, and you can tell our passion comes across in the screen here, people who really believe in this work, and people who sign up for parks really do, they do it because they believe in the cause. They believe in trying to improve people's lives and make the world a little better place. I know that sounds cheesy, but it's actually true. But anyway, Christian, I know you want to add something to that.
I do. So the effects of the fire on the community of Altadena is devastating. But the effects of the fire on Eaton Canyon is very different, because I see this as we suddenly have before us this natural laboratory available to us to conduct these studies, whether we're bringing in academics from Western institutions or whether we're bringing in tribal elders to conduct cultural burns or teach traditional ecological knowledge on the landscape. We have this open landscape that gives us this opportunity to try these out. This is an opportunity for us. It's like a hard reset, and there's just endless potential here for us to do something different and to do something meaningful. And I feel like one of the biggest opportunities that we have here is not just restoring the land, but restoring relationships. For the people who care for this land, past and present, I think that'll be an integral part of the healing journey for everybody.
Thank you. And so I do want to get to, we have some questions that the audience wrote in too, and we have more coming in. We'll try to get to as many of them as we can. But it really strikes me that the first one that I had here really dovetails nicely what we've been talking about. So we were talking about Eaton Canyon, and then also about Altadena. And the question that was for all of the panelists was, how would you each like to see Altadena built back? And I'm gonna just say really quickly one thing that I would love to see, and am already seeing. So when we Charles mentioned that we removed over 90 eucalyptus trees from the land because for a variety of reasons. One was the fear of the fire danger that they present. They're an invasive species, but they were also destroying, they were harming the oaks, which are native and are sacred to us. In some places the land had the acidity of a lemon. One of our soil surveys showed, so it was really important to us, and we did get some pushback. Some of our neighbors were not thrilled with seeing the removal of trees, which I understand. It can be hard to remove any I love trees too, not eucalyptus as much anymore, but many trees. But then in the wake of the fire and people seeing that the oak survived, that it prevented the fire from going further, our neighbors, love that and love us, which is wonderful. But also we've had a lot of people talk about that and like, well, wait a minute, what should really think about, as you pointed out, this is a moment to really kind of think about how do you rebuild, if you have to, in an area like this, in a way that is more responsive, that really starts to think about, what, it can be as simple as the trees that we're planting, but I mean, I think it's much more deep, as you were noting, Christian, having a real relationship and really not just planting whatever, but really thinking about and being conscious about what we're doing as we're building this back. And I'd love to give all of you the chance to respond to that too. How do you want to see Altadena kind of build back?
So, Wallace, I can start, and I talk a little bit about our efforts immediately after the fire. So you probably read in the LA Times that, Altadena is an incredibly tight-knit community. And after the fires, there was a lot of people needing to meet up with their neighbors and congregate. And so people were just having these sort of on-site meetings on their burnt lots with lawn chairs. And um, we took that to heart and realized that Loma Alta Park could become the epicenter for recovery. And the symbolism in all this is very, very important, is to really create this epicenter for recovery and activity. And so we sought philanthropic support. We worked with the county supervisor, and we opened that park in May, on May 21st. We restored the playground through fire aid funds. We got Dodger Dream Fields. We brought out all the local muralists to paint murals with the children. And I was just out there on Friday, and it's just this vibrant place in the middle of this just charred landscape. It's just kind of incredible. And I think the Landscape Recovery Center could be an extension of that symbolism, a place where people can come to learn about ecological knowledge. There's going to be opportunities for volunteers and docents to sign up. We're going to have working with some Tongva representatives on creating native plant test plots. So when people are rebuilding, they can come and learn about fire-resistant, resilient landscapes in their replanting efforts and what to plant as they start to create. I heard from one Altadena resident, she said, we don't want it to look like Palm Springs. But I think that the palette of native plants, there's a lot to work with there, and Cristhian can talk about that. But in terms of what I want to see, so yes, I'm working on the bureaucratic process with the regional planning. I'm working with FEMA. We're hoping to get federal dollars at some point. But I'm also working with one of our consultants, Konkui Design Initiative, and they do deeply embedded community engagement, and we work with them on several projects. They just received funding from the United Way to do what they're calling a People's Action Plan, and it's got a specific focus on the BIPOC community within Altadena and their social needs, with a particular focus on economic development recovery, affordable housing, and other issues. And we're really going to make sure that those recommendations are folded into the county's single unified recovery plan. And, ultimately, my hope, and I've worked on Charles White Park and some of the cultural aspects, the historic African-American community in Altadena, the arts community. My hope is that Altadena is able to regain its artistic and cultural heritage and, and its outlaw spirit. It has that. And the people who made Altadena so unique are able to return. That's my hope.
So I remember last year I was in a meeting at Eaton Canyon with members of the Pasadena Audubon Society. And one of them said something to me that has stuck with me this whole time, that Eaton Canyon represents something greater than itself. It is a community hub for the San Gabriel Valley. And boy, I feel like those words couldn't be truer. And so I think Sean did a very lovely job of describing how the Landscape Recovery Center can be that physical location that brings relationships back to people and to the land at Eaton Canyon. But for me, additionally, one of the ways that I see like Altadena coming back is to let Eaton Canyon dictate the pace of its own healing. Not rushing to reopen trails before they're ready, not going out and just covering the canyon in hydroseed, not treating it as a place as something to fix, but really as something to observe, to listen to take a step back and let the landscape tell us the path forward. And we're already seeing that now. I keep talking about the oak woodland. I think I can count on two whole hands how many oak trees we actually lost to the fire. But with the loss of those oak trees, there are already more little oak seedlings than I can count sprouting up all over the place. So the canyon is showing us how it's recovering. There were sycamore trees that were, one thing that we haven't talked about, I'm suddenly realizing about this landscape that makes it so different from other fires, is that right after, a month after the Eaton fire, we were hit with a massive storm surge through the canyon. And then 1 month later, a second massive storm surge. So it fundamentally changed the topography and the landscape out there. It is fundamentally different from what we recognize. But to the canyon, at a larger scale, it's all the same. It's just part of the natural cycle of change through the canyon. But in part of that storm surge, I observed sycamore trees that were pushed more than 45 degrees down. Some of them are practically laying down, and yet they are resilient. The cambium is intact, the living tissue is intact, and they are leafing out and growing. And so I feel like there is opportunity to watch to see how the canyon is coming back before we jump in there and start changing things too much.
Thank you for that. The question that you posed, Wallace, of what does rebuilding Altadena look like, I think is a challenging question to answer, right? On the one hand, I feel devastated myself that so many people lost homes, lost family, lost pets in the fire. On the other hand, we have to, critically analyze through a lens of settler colonialism that the building on our lands is part of the settler colonial project. So if we take settler colonialism as something to include in the analysis, then without saying no, you can't be here on our lands because that's impossible. We're not going to enter into those types of politics of excluding and deporting and all of that, right? So then the alternative is that we would like people to rebuild in a way that's much more in relation to the land that they're living on, that they are conscious of our non-human relatives, that they're conscious of whose land that they're living on, that they are forming a relationality to those lands, that they're going into Eaton Canyon and learning the life cycles of plants, that they're learning how those plants can be utilized and gathered for foods and medicines, and that it's not about just ripping things out of the ground, but it's done in a respectful way. It also includes replanting because there's so many people. We also need to be about replanting, and that might not mean physically replanting in Eaton Canyon itself, but replanting in their own yards and planting native species and creating forests and gardens and sage scrub and all of that in their front yards and their backyards, and knowing what those plants are, so it's not, as Sean had mentioned, looks like Palm Springs, right? And I'm not sure what the person meant exactly by that, but what I'm seeing, kind of what I envision, is that they view it as not having plants, which is, not the case at all. But they may not view our native plants as being something to see through a respectful lens. And so, how can we form new relationalities and start new in that rebuilding that's perhaps not even about the building, but about relationality and respect.
And Charles, I think that, our department can play a significant role in that educational process, working with tribal communities. One of the things that we have in place is an acquisition strategy. So when you go up into Eaton Canyon or the Altadena community today, and you'll see signs all over the place, Altadena is not for sale. There's a lot of predatory developers moving in, taking advantage of people's vulnerabilities right now. But if you look at the maps, the aerial maps of our parks, that, for instance, like Charles White Park or Farnsworth Park, all the residential properties within a 2 or 3 block radius are completely burnt to the ground. So there could be opportunities to consider respectful acquisitions of those properties that people don't want to return. They don't want to rebuild. They might want to sell the lands to expand the acreage of open space in those communities. We're also looking in the WUI, which is the Wild Interface again, for people who just joined. And there's some great, very large parcels that are up for sale right now that create enormous opportunities to take these pieces of land out of private ownership and put them into public hands. There's a nursery, 80-acre nursery. There's a bunch of other large scale parcels. So we're looking at that. And then we're also looking at how do we fill in the gaps of our regional trail network. Eaton Canyon is one of our most popular trailheads in LA County. We have over 1 million people a year come to visit Eaton Canyon. We saw a 300% increase in visitation during COVID. It really became a pressure valve for the county of people coming out to the site. And there's an inherent tension in the work we do. We have to provide access, recreational access, as well as protection of these sensitive and fragile resources. And when you have that level that pushes beyond the carrying capacity of the canyon, that's when you start to see human destruction of the environment. And so striking that balance in the future is going to be one of our biggest challenges. Anyway, I'll stop there.
No, thank you all for those responses. We do have a lot of other questions. I know we're not going to be able to get to all of them, but I do want to get to a couple other ones. We have some specific ones for individual panelists as well. So, Sean, we have one. When will maybe Christian, you might answer this too. When will Eaton Canyon reopen to the public, and will access roll out in phases?
Yeah, I can start that, and then Christian, you can finish. So, right after the fire, so we worked very closely with the national parks, the national forest, and other cities within the San Gabriel Mountains that manage trails. There is a significant public health hazard in terms of there's hazardous conditions on the trails right now. And so we worked on a unified communication strategy and a closure plan. And there was a press conference in May to talk about the closure of Eaton Canyon, which we anticipate will be anywhere from 18 to 24 months to allow the land to heal, to allow us to repair the trails network, to provide safe access for people coming back. But just think about that. That's 1 million people who are not able to recreate in this popular space. But the Landscape Recovery Center will be a place where people can come. They'll be able to congregate. They'll be able to learn about, like I said, traditional ecological knowledge. And I think that there is a rush to maybe do this in phases as well. But anyway, Christian, do you want to finish up on that?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So, been brought up, 1 million people visit Eaton Canyon in a year on a post-fire landscape that is delicate, is in the middle of recovery. It's a two-pronged reason why the park remains closed. One, to protect people from the hazardous elements. I mean, the trails were buried in landslides, in erosion from the storm surges. So it's a fragile landscape, but there's also still ash all over the land. And it's doing its thing right now where it's trying to settle in. And so if we had hundreds, thousands, hundreds of thousands of people walking through these spaces, they would be disturbing a delicate landscape that's in the middle of recovering. So it's important for people to understand why right now it's so crucial to stay outside of Eaton Canyon. But I am so excited by the Landscape Recovery Center's impending opening, because we're going to hit the ground running with all sorts of opportunities to get volunteers involved in a number of projects out there. At least from a biological standpoint, from wildlife trail camera studies to vegetation assessments to bio blitzes. There's to tree health assessments. there's going to be so many opportunities to bring people back into this space. And I think it's going to be really healing, because I was doing a presentation maybe a month or two ago for the California Native Plant Society, and folks in the audience were just so, uh, you could just see in their hearts how much they were yearning for any kind of information, a glimpse into the park. And so, the county heard that, and we're going to create a website that's going to have updated photos to show people the path, the journey of recovery in this space. And then before you know it, we're going to have people back in this space, and they'll be able to see for themselves what recovery looks like in the canyon. And so it's phased, but time flies, and we're going to be in there before you know it.
Thank you. No, thank you both, and that's good to hear. Charles, there's a question, but I think Christian, you might be able to also dovetail into this. I know we are running short on time, but so we'll just try to kind of keep them a little short. What is traditional ecological knowledge in plain language? And then I think really here's the heart of it, and how is it different from or complementary to Western science? Really, what is that? How do these things relate? And we've had a couple of people in the chat also ask kind of questions around that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So traditional ecological knowledge is science. It is contemporary, right? It's not something of the past. It is contemporary. As contemporary indigenous peoples, we don't always have the same knowledge that our ancestors had because of colonialism. But that doesn't mean that there aren't people who are practicing traditional ecological knowledge and that there aren't tribal communities that are learning from one another in order to reestablish traditional ecological knowledge in our communities. The main difference between a Western science and traditional ecological knowledge can be thought of in that TEK is grounded in native epistemology, ontology, cosmology, meaning it's intrinsically connected to the worldviews of native peoples and our relationship with our homelands that pre-exist colonialism, that have changed over time and that continue to change as active cultures do. And so traditional ecological knowledge is a continuation of the ancestors' knowledge, but with new ideas. And that can borrow from Western science as well. But it is science and it is contemporary.
Thank
What
you.
I'm really
Oh, yeah,
excited
Christian,
about,
please.
what I'm really excited about is that uh, I think this can all come back as one of the most powerful tools we have in building the resource management plan for Eaton Canyon. I mean, this is a document that will, like I said this already, but it'll guide like the ecological recovery of the canyon, public access, monitoring, and education for years to come. So the incorporation of traditional ecological knowledge, it's not just an afterthought. It's not just a one-time insertion at the like initial recovery of the canyon, but it's structured. The management plan itself is structured to include these concepts, these core values into the stewardship of the park, from how we delineate restoration zones to how we approach invasive species removal, guided by long-term monitoring, public participation in science and stewardship, and of course that science includes TEK, and also in creating this ever-growing network of collaborators, including tribal leaders and also our local Eaton Canyon Nature Center Association volunteers. So I feel like it's this collaboration. We have this opportunity for collaboration, and I'm trying to create language in the resource management plan that makes that apparent.
Thank you. No, and you mentioned this too, and this is that I'm seeing a question repeated both in the Q&A and then some of the previous questions and on the chat on the side that I just want to really kind of stress here. A lot of interest in sort of like how can we get involved, how can we get engaged? And you just mentioned a particular organization. You say it again. It was the
Right, right. The Eaton Canyon Nature Center Association. So in the natural areas, there is an umbrella nonprofit organization, the Nature Center Associations, and Eaton Canyon has one. And you can hop online. You can go to ecnca.org and learn more information about this organization. You can become a member. You can you can become a part of their emailing list where they send out a monthly newsletter. And right there is one of the ways that you can get informed on ways that you can participate in a number of recovery aspects in the canyon. I also think the Instagram or the social media presence is also another way to follow county Instagram accounts to be made aware of what's happening at Eaton Canyon. Eaton Canyon has an Instagram page. You can follow us there. You can follow along with the ECNCA. I would also recommend looking into the San Gabriel Mountains chapter of the California Native Plant Society. I am working with them weekly on creating opportunities to bring people to the natural areas, not just Eaton Canyon, but all the natural areas around the county.
No, thank you.
And
And
they got
I
a
just,
newsletter too, is what I'm trying to say. So there's a
right.
number of ways that people can be informed on opportunities to participate in what we're doing at Eaton Canyon.
Right. We know we have a lot of people asking about how they can be involved in Eaton Canyon, the recovery there. We've had people asking about the Tongva Tarahat Bahava Conservancy. You can find our website at tongva.land, Tongva dot land. We made it as easy as possible. You can go there and sign up and get information. We hadn't been able to because of everything that Christian was talking about the post recovery, but we're almost able to kind of have we're starting to have our volunteer days back. This has been really wonderful experiences. So please sign up there. We're going to give you a chance in just a second on the poll if you want to kind of say something about that. Are there any other ways to get involved or engaged that Charles or Sean you wanted to kind of point out?
I was reading a comment in the chat that reminded me that I forgot to, bring up an important point, and it's not just about participation, but it's like, how are we going to sustain this? And I think that in the past, when we asked for community-based organizations or tribal input, it was extractive. Please come to this meeting. Please look at this document. There has to be compensation for participation. Not only that, we have to make sure that when we're applying for grants, like when the Proposition 4 bond funds become available, and they're being released right now as we speak, and the first wave of funding will be for fire recovery, we want to make sure that we embed traditional ecological knowledge as a priority in ecological restoration. And then on a similar front, we need to work with our policy experts and our folks in Sacramento to meet with the funders, with California State Parks, Wildlife Conservation Board, and the conservancies to make sure that they put TEK as a criteria for selecting grantors, they get higher scores in the grant application process using traditional ecological knowledge as a component of the restoration effort. So it's got to be done on multiple fronts, but I think the bottom line is this has to be funded, and it has to be a long-term commitment to it as well.
Thank you. Charles?
Just one thing that I was saying earlier about native plants in your home, in your garden, in your front yard, your backyard, right? Like really reinvesting in native plants and learning about them and re-engaging um, in our relatives. One of the comments in the chat was about TEK, and that TEK is about caring for our relatives, right? That it's a hands-on approach. And you may not have the experience or the knowledge to go out to Eaton Canyon and participate and help and, do that, but you can start it at home. You can start experimenting and learning about native plants and which grow, and doing, being involved with other people, and look at gardening as not just only something to do as a purely for like tomatoes and things like that we normally think of as gardening, but it's also native plants, and there's a lot of food sources from native plants that you can be growing in your garden.
Thank you. And, you know, I know we have a lot of questions that we didn't get a chance to get to. We didn't even get a chance to get to all the pre-asked questions. We tried to kind of address them. And I know some of our staff were wonderfully trying to kind of give information to individuals who were requesting it too. And again, as we'd mentioned, we're going to have more of these. We've got a record of these questions, so hopefully we'll be able to address some of these concerns and issues in future webinars that we do. But as we kind of close up today, I do want to do a couple of things, which is just to note kind of like how important this is for our community engagement projects. We're going to have a final poll question that will ask about sort of the biggest takeaway, but also I believe, give you a chance to you know, kind of say if you want to be engaged in this work particularly. We want to really particularly welcome, you know, everyone, but we really want more of our Tongva community to be engaged and be part of the TTPC as we move forward. We're really hoping to kind of build up our presence and our ability to kind of be engaged in this throughout our homelands. And as we, you know, kind of start closing up the conversation for today, we want to just take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the deep knowledge and traditions that have guided so much of what we've discussed. You know, we're thanking our ancestors. We try to think generationally, you know, both to forward what we're going to be leaving behind for our children and our descendants, but we also have to recognize, you know, how much of this, how much work, how much energy, how much love and care in time it took to build this knowledge. And I'm glad to see it being, you know, re-engaged with in this way. But I just want to thank our ancestors for doing that work of generations and centuries and millennia. So I think we're going to be launching that final pretty open poll question about a biggest takeaway, but also giving you a chance to kind of say something else there. And let us know if you want to be engaged with us. Oh, there we go. Okay. Oh, I thought there was going to be something about the biggest takeaway too. But you can put it in the chat. But also, I just want to thank our panelists again, all for being here and for sharing their insights, their knowledge about that, and just to thank them all for their engagement and their efforts in doing this really important work. I love to see the positive energy for this in the wake of the challenges that we've had. I just want to thank all of our the folks who are here watching and listening to this. It's been wonderful to see. I'm again so sorry we couldn't get to all your comments. Been wonderful to see how engaged you are all, and so many of you I recognize there. I saw that last comment that Charles mentioned was from Kat. Just really wonderful to see so many people I know engaged with this work and thinking about it, and it really gives me hope for the future here. Anything else any of our panelists want to say or have a last word before we end this?
I just want to say quickly, Wallace and Charles, thank you so much for inviting Christian and I to participate in this important discussion. It's an honor to be in both of your presence. And hopefully we can come back at some point in time and report on the progress that we've made. Because, it's got to be about the action on the ground. And so, yeah, I would like to come back when we open the Landscape Recovery Center and report how much has been done since we last spoke.
That would be great. I look forward to that. Yeah.
Amazing.
I agree. This is an exciting first step in rebuilding our relationship at Eaton Canyon.
Well, once again, thank you all for being here. Not just our panelists, not just all the wonderful staff, people who made this possible too. There's a lot of people you're not seeing here on the screen who made this possible. And again, to those the 200 and plus people who were here watching this today, thank you. Owesh Koneha, thank you so much for being here with us. We really hope that this will start bringing wonderful change to our homelands. Thank you, everybody. All right. I'm going to